One ordinary day when nothing portended a storm, a bolt from the blue struck. The man returned home after a long trip, and the words that escaped his lips changed everything. February 28th, a Tuesday. A day some consider an omen of bad luck, became the starting point for a new life for the protagonist. She was standing in the hallway, struggling to pull off a winter boot, when she heard the words, divorce, spoken as if it were an everyday occurrence. Her husband, ignoring her difficulty, walked into the room, leaving her alone with the shocking news. At that moment, time seemed to slow down, and various memories resurfaced. Tuesdays, with their monotonous repetition, now felt like harbingers of an approaching storm. But perhaps it had all begun much earlier, on one of those gray, indistinguishable weekdays. Finally free from her cumbersome boots, the woman entered the room. Her husband stood by the window, his posture betraying intense agitation. A short dialogue ensued, filled with unspoken meanings. Their conversation touched upon their daughter, her adjustment to kindergarten, and the endless illnesses that had plagued the child since September. The man looked exhausted, yet it didn't diminish his attractiveness. He had been handsome in his youth and had only grown more intriguing with age. She recalled her own childhood, her parents' divorce, and her father with a Boudiani-like mustache, whom she barely remembered. After exchanging meaningless pleasantries, her husband got straight to the point. He uttered the words, divorce, as if delivering a verdict. She responded calmly, but a storm raged within her. Beneath her composure lay a long struggle, all the stages of accepting the inevitable that she had endured over the past year. Denial, anger, resentment, self-reproach, all had been experienced. Hysterics, tears, broken dishes, nothing could change the situation. Her husband had confessed to infidelity, begged for forgiveness, but soon enough, it had happened again. Now he accused her of lacking support and understanding, of no longer being interesting. With another woman, he claimed, a firework of emotions awaited him. It seemed their marriage had devolved into a chaotic cycle of emotional phases, where Oleg, like a pendulum, swung from self-flagellation and declarations of eternal love for Sonechka to unbridled merriment in her company. These transformations repeated endlessly, dulling her perception of what was happening. In such a situation, self-preservation took over, forcing her to detach from the raging passions. Yet, it was now, during another period of euphoria, that Oleg first brought up divorce. Immersed in a dream world with his new lover, he only occasionally deigned to acknowledge reality. But this time, perhaps out of guilt or a desire to save face, he tried to maintain appearances. He reported on business trips, simulated work calls while water ran in the background, and no longer smelled of other women's perfume. Furthermore, he made several clumsy attempts to fulfill his marital duties, which were rejected without regret. A natural question arises. Why didn't she initiate the divorce herself? Perhaps a naive hope lingered that their former feelings would return, that this was merely a fleeting infatuation. After all, there had once been love between them. Had it truly vanished without a trace? Moreover, Oleg had always been impulsive and prone to risky ventures. One only had to recall the incident 3 years prior, when he took out a massive loan and invested the money in a dubious financial pyramid scheme. The collapse of that scam buried their dreams of a new car and overseas property. They had to pay the price by selling the two-bedroom apartment she inherited from her mother, where they had lived after her death, and moving into a modest studio apartment. "Dasha, I've come for my things. And of course, the apartment will remain with you and Liza," he declared solemnly, sparking a wave of indignation. What nerve! Oleg apparently realized the absurdity of his statement, as his gaze instantly turned sharp and his lips thinned into a tight line, a sure sign of irritation caused by guilt. "Listen, Dashiell, maybe you should file for divorce yourself. Otherwise, the pangs of my conscience won't let me sleep peacefully," she suggested sarcastically. "Why do you always have to start something?" Oleg snapped, rushing to the wardrobe. Grabbing a suitcase, he began to hastily pack his belongings. "I'm talking to you calmly. I want to maintain a friendly relationship. After all, we have a daughter. Speaking of our daughter, do you plan to visit her?" "Well, of course," Oleg replied indignantly. "And I'll pay alimony. What are you trying to make me out to be, some kind of monster?" "It's unlikely we'll remain friends," she retorted belatedly. "I'm sorry, but I don't choose people like that for my friends." Dragging the suitcase with difficulty into the stairwell, her husband, now ex-husband, mumbled, "All right, Dasha, bye." As she closed the door behind him, she tried to maintain an outward calm. But as soon as the elevator rumbled and clanked, carrying Oleg out of her and Liza's life, she leaned against the wall and gave in to tears. Her sobs, however, were short-lived, perhaps because there was no one to comfort her. 40 minutes later, she left the building. A visit to social services was still on her agenda. She had no desire to see anyone, but, as luck would have it, her neighbor, Aunt Lena, appeared. After a brief greeting, she tried to slip past, but Aunt Lena, barely concealing her curiosity beneath a facade of feigned sympathy, spoke, "Hello? Hello? Why are your eyes so red? Crying, I suppose. Did he leave? Well, it'll all blow over. Things will get better. You're still young, not even 30. You'll lose weight. You'll recover, God willing. You'll meet someone. And it's nothing, even with a child? These days, men don't raise their own. They mostly raise others. What an amazing woman." In one sentence, a complete assessment. A chubby woman under 30, abandoned by her husband, with a child, and bleak prospects. Her mood plummeted, and she was ready to burst into tears again. Just then, Jenka called. Upon hearing the sad news, her friend profoundly declared, "What did you expect? It's Tuesday. All right, don't mope. I'll come over tonight. I have cognac." Why had she told Zhenya everything? She couldn't stand cognac, and she didn't want to meet anyone, preferring to process her troubles alone. She needed to internalize the problem, get used to it, sleep on it, and examine it closely. Then, the fear would recede, clarity would emerge, and a solution would present itself. Drunken conversations, tears, and sympathy, even if sincere, unlike Aunt Lena's, all felt superfluous. But she couldn't offend her friend. Lost in thought, she didn't notice she had reached the road. She needed to cross to the other side, but the pedestrian crossing was far away, and she didn't feel like walking to it. The roads were piled high with snow. The plows hadn't kept up. She decided to cross the street right there, especially since there weren't many cars. Huge snowdrifts lined the roadside, and she clambered onto a snow ridge, trying to figure out the best way to get across. What happened next was a blur. Later, She was told that the snowdrift beneath her unexpectedly collapsed, pulling her onto the roadway. Desperate attempts to hold on were futile, and, crying out something inarticulate, she slid right under the wheels of a passing car. Coming to her senses fairly quickly, the woman found herself sitting on the wet, stained asphalt. Beside her stood an elegant blue foreign car, and in front of her, kneeling, was a young man, about 25, with a pale face contorted with anxiety. Something about his appearance seemed vaguely familiar to her. "Miss dear, can you hear me? How are you feeling?" he asked with a trembling voice, noticing her gaze. "How did this happen? Oh my God. Why? I'm sorry. I tried to brake and swerve. I hope you're not badly hurt. Can you move? Where does it hurt? Where?" Like a small child, she thought, and involuntarily smiled, replying, "I think I'm okay." She shook her head and moved her arms. Cars sped past, but no one stopped, showed interest in what was happening, or offered help. "Someone should call the police," a grumpy female voice called out from above. The woman looked up and saw two elderly ladies and a man in a huge fur hat resembling a bird's nest standing on top of the snowdrift. "They race around here, and people have nowhere to walk." No, please, no police," she objected, frightened. She definitely didn't want to get stuck there. After all, she still needed to get to social services and then to work. "It's my fault. You can't cross the road here. I'm fine. I'll get up now." She tried to stand, but immediately sank back down. A sharp pain shot through her left foot. "What happened?" the young man asked, concerned. "Your leg." "Yes, my foot hurts." "Let me see." He began to cautiously, yet clumsily, examine her feet. The group of onlookers on the snowdrift livened up, starting to chatter. But she no longer paid them any mind. She was more concerned about her own foot. What if it was a fracture? If she had to be hospitalized, who would take care of Liza? This ill-fated Tuesday was throwing one misfortune after another at her. For the umpteenth time that day, her nose tingled and her eyes filled with traitorous tears. "Are you a doctor?" she asked, wincing in pain. "No, I'm a geologist," he replied, stopping his awkward attempts to assess her foot. "But my best friend is a top-notch surgeon. We'll go to his hospital now." "Don't worry. Everything will be fine," the young man stated decisively. Then, surprisingly easily, lifted her into his arms and settled her into the car. She started to mention that her dirty coat might stain his seat, but he waved it off. "It doesn't matter." The interior was warm and cozy, soft music played, and there was a pleasant coffee scent. She noticed a small air freshener on the dashboard. The car smoothly pulled away and merged into traffic. They drove in silence for some time. Then the young man turned to her and asked, "How are you doing? Does it hurt badly?" "Bearable. And what a clumsy person I am." "You're not clumsy at all," he smiled. "It's just how life is these days. Everyone's rushing, hurrying, and all sorts of things happen." At that moment, he reminded her of someone again. But who? She still couldn't recall and said, "Yeah, well, I certainly rushed. My name is Dasha, by the way. What's yours?" "Vladimir. It's a pleasure to meet you. Although the circumstances could certainly be more pleasant." Suddenly, it dawned on her, and before she could fully process it, she blurted out, "Vladimir, are you by any chance Sergeyevich?" "Sergeyevich?" He looked at her, surprised. "How do you know that? Do we know each other?" "No, but I'm also Sergeyevna," she replied foolishly, then paused and added, "My current last name is Pimenova, but before marriage, It was Savelchenko.
You're also Savelchenko, right? It turned out she had been hit by her own brother's car. Imagine that. What a coincidence. More than a year has passed since then. Now, she can hardly imagine how she managed all those years without Vovka. It turned out their father had died of a heart attack, the same year as her mother. Larisa Petrovna, Vovka's mother and her father's second wife, welcomed her and Liza as her own. Liza calls Larisa Petrovna grandma and adores Vovka so much that Dasha sometimes feels envious. Larisa Petrovna and Vovka are similar both in appearance and personality. Both are incredibly kind, pure-hearted, without a hidden agenda, and a bit quirky in their childlike openness. Vovka hasn't started a family yet. His girlfriends change so quickly that they can't keep track of their names and faces. But she can't fault him for his fickleness. He simply hasn't met his one and only yet. When he does, there's no doubt he will be the most loyal and devoted husband. Vovka, one could say, took Dasha and Liza under his wing, like a good Samaritan. He fixed all the faucets and wiring in the apartment, completed the long-awaited renovations that Oleg never got around to, and took her and her daughter to the sea for the summer. Vovka happily dotes on his niece and often takes her to puppet shows, the zoo, or children's cafes on weekends. Almost all the time, from May to September, Liza lives at the dacha with Grandma Lara, and both of them are very content in each other's company. Oh, I almost forgot. It turned out she didn't have a fracture, just a dislocation. Kostik, Vovka's best friend, reset her dislocation in no time. He's an excellent doctor, attentive and serious. At 34, he's already a PhD, head of a department, and working on his doctoral dissertation. Patients adore Kostik, and she was no exception. From the very beginning, she felt an inexplicable fondness for him.
Their communication evolved into a warm friendship and then into a romantic relationship. 2 months ago, an exciting event occurred. Kostik proposed marriage, and of course, she accepted. The wedding celebration is planned for June, and Vovka, the groom's close friend and now the bride's future relative, makes no secret of his joy. As for her own feelings, they are so strong that sometimes she feels as if everything happening is just a beautiful dream. A shiver runs through her at the thought of an ordinary morning arriving and her waking up next to Oleg. After learning that men like Kostik exist, it would be unbearable for her to return to her old life with Oleg. Incidentally, Oleg, in the best tradition of delinquent child support payers, receives part of his salary unofficially and pays his daughter only 25% of the legally mandated minimum wage. He and Sonechka have broken up, and he is now seeking sexual solace elsewhere. Fortunately, she has absolutely no interest in where or with whom he spends his time. What else can be added to this story? Oh yes, Jenka, who will be her maid of honor at the wedding, has forever changed her attitude toward Tuesdays after experiencing a significant event.